I wonder how Sony determined what was going to be a Walkman and what was just a portable cassette recorder. The reason I mention it is because one of these isn't a Walkman, although it does look a lot like one and it shares a lot of the same internals. Can you spot which one it is? I'm going to take the Walkman away one by one and see if you pick the right one. The model that's left is a WA8000 stereo cassette recorder. Now, I do wonder why it wasn't allowed in the Walkman Club. It won't be because it records. There are plenty of recording Walkman models. Similarly, it won't be because it's got a speaker on it, as there were some Walkman that had those too. The radio, well, it's not unusual on a Walkman, well, other than for the fact that this one can pick up 9 bands. Perhaps, though, it's the big aerial that meant it couldn't be a Walkman, or more than likely, it was just that it was too big. It is, after all, even larger than the Sony Professional Walkman. And if that was the reason why it wasn't a Walkman, then you can see why the model that replaced it definitely wouldn't be allowed to be a Walkman either. Although if it was, it would most certainly have been the longest Walkman ever made. This is the Sony WA8800, although confusingly in some countries it's known as a WA8000 Mark II, despite being an all-new model and with few, if any, shared components from the earlier model. Now, rather than having a single speaker on the back, this time it's got stereo speakers at either side on the front. It can also now tune into 1 extra shortwave band, so that's now 10 bands in total, including medium wave and FM. The digital clock also doubles as a tape counter, and this can be used as an alarm clock radio as well. On the side are stereo microphone in and headphone out sockets. It's powered by a DC adapter or 2 AA batteries. There's a telescopic aerial on the back, and it's an auto-reverse cassette deck that's capable of recording the mic input or the radio, although there's no Dolby noise reduction on this one. I recently bought this via eBay, and it's in good condition overall, with an unscratched case, and the clock and the radio work just fine.
Chapel House car swap starts at 9 AM.
However, I got this at a very good price because it was advertised as in need of repair, and of course the part that needs repairing is the cassette mechanism. Although you can hear the motor whirring away inside, which shows that there's a good chance I can fix it. To see what the problem is though, I'm going to have to remove the back, and the screws that need to be taken out are all helpfully marked with an arrow. Now, as I'm taking the screws out of this, though, I notice that they're all different sizes, so I'm making sure to keep track of where each screw should go back as I put them on this magnetic tray for safekeeping. I was surprised to find that the aerial wasn't attached with a wire. Instead, it gets held against a contact whenever the back is screwed on, which makes disassembly a little bit easier. Now, I can see what looks like a loose belt poking out underneath the circuit board, but when I touch it with a screwdriver, it disintegrates into a tar-like paste. So now I need to remove the circuit board to get inside and hope that the rest of the belt hasn't caused too much mess. Now, initially the circuit board didn't seem to want to come out, but once I'd removed the last screw on the side that was the one holding it in place, it started to come free. The only thing that's holding the circuit board down now are the wires that run across it, but Sony's helpfully provided a certain amount of slack on each of these, but then taped down that loop of slack to the board, so it was just a matter of untaping all the wires to free up a bit of slack, which then enabled the board to be hinged up, and then there was just one connector which could be unplugged, and finally I could get access to the mechanism. And unfortunately, it wasn't good news. The belt had completely turned to goo, and there were remnants of this spread across all the parts of the mechanism. So every last bit of this needs to be painstakingly cleaned off until there's no residue whatsoever. Otherwise, the new belt is just going to stick to it. So I set about cleaning it all off with isopropyl alcohol and cleaning sticks. However, there are quite a few places where those sticks couldn't get into. They couldn't reach into the very thin gap where the rubber belt was originally located. So for those, I've soaked some expandable dental floss in the isopropyl alcohol and then pulled it through the wheels over and over again. Now, this was an incredibly long-winded process, and the black tar-like stuff had really got into everything. It was on the motor hub and on this brass wheel and this hard-to-get-to white plastic wheel that you can barely see, and then this thing in the middle, and then this one over on the right. So 2 long hours later, I finally cleaned everything off, So now it was time to put the new belt on, although I really had no idea of the correct path of the belt, but I also had a bit of time to figure it out, as my belt had yet to arrive. So as soon as the belt turned up, I got back to fixing this deck. Now, occasionally people ask me where I get my rubber belts from. Well, as far as Walkman belts go, it's always from this place, fixyouraudio.com. These are custom made to the right length and thickness. There's no need to measure or guess the length of your belt if you know the model number of your Walkman. I also managed to download the service manual from Hi-Fi Engine, and in here there was a picture of the belt path. So now I know how to properly install it. It wasn't too tricky either, just took a few minutes, and of course I made sure it wasn't twisted. If it does look twisted on the camera, remember I took a lot more time over this than you're seeing in this video. If we were watching this in real time, we'd have been here for over a week by now. But before I put it back together properly, I just want to make sure that it's working. So after reconnecting up that wire and holding everything in place temporarily, I put a tape in, and I was happy to see that it played properly. Now, initially, it was a little bit wobbly, understandably, but I'd also lubricated a few components here and there, so after a short play, it was all moving smoothly, and the auto-reverse and the rewind and the fast-forward, they're all functioning well. While I'd still got the case open, it seemed like a good opportunity to clear the dirt off that had built up around these switches. Much easier to do this when you can get to both sides of them. And it was just a matter of then putting everything back where it belonged, including carefully routing the wires and then sticking them back down again, and then finally finishing the whole thing off with a clean from a slightly damp microfiber cloth. And it now looks almost as good as new, and seems to function that way as well. I'm going to start off by recording something from the radio, so I'll switch the display across from the clock to the digital tape counter mode. And notice that whilst it's recording, the tape direction LED also functions as a record level indicator.
Again next spring. My thanks go to our specialist question writers.
Counterpoint is chaired by Paul Gambaccini and produced in Salford by Paul Bajoria. The programme will be back in 2020, and as Paul mentioned, the email address for an application form is counterpoint@bbc.co.uk. Well done, Brian. Counterpoint is chaired by Paul Gambaccini.
So the recording functions fine. Now let's find out what this alarm sounds like. Now the timer doesn't have any control over the cassette, so you can't wake up to a tape or set automatic recordings. However, you can wake up to the radio.
To put your questions to a panel of experts and help you contribute your insight.
Now, whilst the FM reception was coming in loud and clear, initially I wasn't picking up anything at all on any of the shortwave bands. And then I remembered that someone had told me that LED lights could cause interference with shortwave reception. So listen what happens when I turn the light off. Yes, as soon as the light went off, the interference vanished, and I was now able to pick up quite a few different stations.
Government and a charity couldn't enable him to win and lead.
So you can have a listen now over the speakers to a tape I'd recorded previously. And here's what it sounds like as a direct feed. So a successful repair this time. Now on eBay, a fully working one of these can fetch some pretty crazy prices, and there seems to be quite a bit of a demand for them if you look at the number of bids on this one. However, you can find them quite a bit cheaper than that though, although those are the models that are in need of repair. But with a bit of luck, they might only need a replacement belt and a heck of a lot of cleaning. Of course, it's always a gamble with something like this. You might just end up with an expensive paperweight. There was one other thing in that carrying case though, a neat little stereo clip-on mic, and It doesn't sound bad at all.
I'm so glad I managed to get this up and running again. Despite the 2 hours plus worth of cleaning, it really has been worthwhile because it's just such a beautiful object that exemplifies Sony at their best. I hope you've enjoyed having a look at it here today, but that is it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.
Oh good! A new video from my favourite channel! Everyone's gonna think I'm so cool. Now, let's have a look at it.
What's up guys? It's Zach, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the bell to stay notified about the latest updates.
Going science with Zach.
Today, I want to talk about the first Walkman. This one is from 1981.
Oh, actually, the Walkman you're showing came out in 1979 and on pause.
However, 1981 is only when my grandfather bought it. It actually came out in 1979 in Japan. If you look here on the top, you can see two headphone sockets labelled up as A and B.
Pause. Did you know that on the first model, those headphone outputs were actually labelled up as guys and dolls?
Why are you reading aloud what you're typing?
It's a common trope used on TV to keep the viewer informed as to what's going on.
Well, I wish you wouldn't, it's annoying.
OK, point noted, he says as he proceeds to press the play button again.
However, on the first batch, these were labelled as guys and dolls.
Oh, he did know that.
Over the years, the name Walkman became synonymous with personal stereos.
Pressing pause. One other little known fact is that in other countries they were called the freestyle, the stowaway, or the soundabout. Unpause.
It's common knowledge that outside Japan, it was initially known as the stowaway, the soundabout, or the freestyle.
Oh, interesting.
Stop!
What?
Just wait until the end of the video before commenting on it.
Why would I do that?
Oh, I don't know. Perhaps it's because when you interrupt things, you keep making a fool of yourself.
How do you mean?
Well, every
breath you take?
No, every
move you make?
No, every time you write...
Write a letter to Santa?
No.
Write the complete works of Shakespeare on the back of a stamp?
Every time you write a comment before...
Before a grand jury?
No, before...
B4, a vitamin that's also known as folic acid.
No, before a video has finished...
Has finished its rinse cycle.
What?
Finished third in a downhill slalom.
No, before a video has finished playing, you end up looking...
Looking out for Linda.
Huh?
Looking back, over my shoulder.
No.
Looking in a mirror and seeing the Invisible Man wearing a beanie hat.
You end up looking like a...
Like a virgin. Laika, the Russian space dog.
You end up looking like a buffoon.
That's a bit harsh.
Just wait until you've got all the information before jumping in. You've got the attention span of a Higgs boson particle.
I've forgotten what we were talking about. Unpause.
But that's the end of today's video.
This video was far too long. In future, make them shorter.
You've been watching Zach's Tech Minute. Tech history told in under 60 seconds. Don't remember to like, hit that subscribe, and thumb the bell. I'm Zach, out of here. Woo!
Hey Zach, in the next video you should talk about the Sony Walkman. That would be interesting.